actually bankrupt, Biden allies blast GOP debt limit backup plan. If Congress doesn't increase the borrowing capacity of the federal government in the upcoming months, the Biden administration issues dire warnings. However, some Wall Street analysts and executives are beginning to deviate from that pattern. If the Treasury Department reaches the point where it can no longer pay all of its other obligations, a number of well-known financial experts at Bank of America, Barclays, and other significant firms are confident that the U.S. will avoid a global market collapse by continuing to pay its bondholders. They believe that the United States may accomplish this by deducting money from items like benefits owed to specific Americans or payments to companies doing business with the government. It is in line with conservative lawmakers' positions, who contend that payment prioritization on Treasury securities, the cornerstone of the global financial system, is a workable backup plan as they press for budget cuts that President Joe Biden opposes. The Treasury claims that the proposal would equate to a default, so the White House and Treasury are already opposing it. In spite of the fact that it would be experimental and hazardous, payment prioritization is something that officials feel the government is technically capable of doing, according to revelations during the past few years that were partly sparked by inquiries by House Republicans. The majority of investors who pay close attention to this know the U.S. won't default on its bonds, according to A.J. Rajadhyaksha, Global Chair of Research at Barclays. The discussion about the prospective backup plan highlights the economic uncertainty already brought on by the political impasse over raising the debt ceiling, which is the maximum amount of money that Congress is permitted to authorize the government to borrow. Payment prioritization is not widely believed to work on Wall Street. It also provides a glimpse into the difficult decisions the Biden administration will have to make if Congress are unable to break the impasse. Paying bondholders instead of everyone else, who depend on government payments for their livelihood, would probably result in political backlash and, depending on how long it lasted, might potentially slow the U.S. economy. Former Treasury Secretary Jack Lew, who oversaw the division under President Barack Obama, declared in an interview that the premise is intellectually stupid. However, even some of payment prioritization's detractors agree that it may be preferable to other, worse options, such as debatably legal ideas like creating a coin worth $1 trillion to pay for the government's expenses. Senator Rick Scott, Republican Florida, a conservative, has proposed preserving payments for the government's debt, Social Security, Medicare, veterans benefits, and the armed forces. Prioritization is probably the healthiest horse in the glue factory among all the unilateral debt ceiling possibilities, according to Chris Kruger, a policy analyst at Cowen. After the United States reached its legal borrowing limit on January 19, discussions about backup plans are picking up in Washington and on Wall Street. Treasury is currently paying the government's obligations by means of accounting tricks known as extraordinary measures. Treasury is currently halting investments in public retirement accounts. In the event that it went past the X date, when it would no longer have enough money to pay all of its liabilities, the department hasn't made clear how it would choose which parties to pay. The 2011 debt limit debate, a show of brinksmanship that caused S&P to downgrade the United States credit rating for the first time ever, brought the concept into sharper light. In the years that followed, House Republicans investigated what Treasury could and couldn't do. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York's systems would be technologically capable of continuing to make principal and interest payments while Treasury was not making other kinds of payments, a top Treasury official wrote in a letter to the GOP chair of the House Financial Services Committee in 2014. However, this approach would be entirely experimental and pose an unacceptable risk to both domestic and international financial markets. The official stated that no decision regarding what to do in such a case during the recent debt limit impasses and potential remedies have not been tested. The official was Alistair Fitzpaine, who was then the Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs. According to J.W. Verrett, a Financial Services Committee staffer who worked on the probe, Treasury and the Federal Reserve made records showing thorough tabletop exercises for how to prioritize payments available. Verrett examined the records and found that they stated there's no underlying structural difficulty that precludes them from doing it. In a letter to Treasury from 2014, the committee's Republican leaders, including the current chair, Patrick McHenry, RNC, stated that the New York Fed's documents exhaustively outline how the department and the bank would implement any strategy to prioritize payments on Treasury bonds. Liu acknowledged in the interview that authorities conducted a test to determine whether the government could actually make bond payments. He still believes it to be a horrible plan. "We came to the idea that you might be able to do a tabletop exercise," he continued. "It has never undergone real-world testing. The necessary financial flows are unknown to us. We are unsure of how it might work with other systems that are on or off. Prioritization, according to Liu, means accepting default, but neither of the two presidents he served, Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, chose to prioritize paying bonds over other commitments." He said, "Only the president can decide that. The Treasury Secretary cannot decide on this alone. No president ought to be compelled to make that choice." Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, has also vehemently opposed the idea. According to her earlier this month, a failure on the part of the United States to meet any obligation, whether it be to debt holders, to members of our military, or to Social Security recipients, is basically a default. She continued by saying that the processes in place at Treasury were created to pay all of our bills when they are due and on schedule, and not to prioritize one form of spending over another. The bond trading Goliath PIMCO has added its voice to the critics. "We take Secretary Yellen and previous Treasury secretaries, both Republican and Democratic, at their word that prioritizing payments under Treasury's existing systems is simply not viable and should not be viewed as a feasible alternative to Congress raising the debt ceiling," PIMCO head of public policy Libby Cantrell said in a statement. However, some financial industry analysts and executives are still optimistic that Treasury will be able to pull it off despite the warnings. According to Unlimited Fund's CEO Bob Elliott, who previously oversaw research at the world's largest hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates, they have the instruments available to be able to avert a default or a disturbance in the capital markets. "We would expect them to use those tools to prevent a default in the United States. Treasury should be more open," according to Ralph Axel, a rates analyst at Bank of America. He stated, "They need to tell everyone what the real situation is with the Treasury market and whether or not this is genuinely a true major threat or if it's actually entirely benign, which I think it is." However, proponents of payment prioritization on Wall Street continued to claim that it is risky. Even if the market for Treasury securities remained unaffected, the economy as a whole might suffer from the missed payments to other people and businesses. The actual risk, according to Elliott, is that it continues for months, in which case individuals would start to cut back on their spending. "I worry that X date will be missed. The following day, hardly much occurs, and many of those who are holding out say, 'See, everything's perfectly fine,' according to Raja Jayaksha of Barclays. This burns slowly. The worse it gets, the longer it takes."